Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. This is episode 7 of the video series where we're taking a look at On1 Photo 10. In this episode, I'm going to show you how I work On1 Photo 10 effects into my workflow. Now, before I start, just let me say that below in the description of this video, you'll find a link and a discount code. You could use the link to go over to On1 Photo 10 and try out their software. They have a 60-day free trial period, and then use the discount code and you'll save 20% off everything in your shopping cart. All right, now those of you that watch my videos know that I'm a Lightroom user, and I'd say 999 times out of 1,000 I start out in Lightroom. And when I process an image, I'm really concerned about two specific things. I want my images to be as detailed as possible and as low noise as possible. And the reason being is I'm fortunate enough where I sell some signed limited edition prints. And when people pay me like a four-figure sum for a print, they expect to get a quality product. They expect it to be detailed, and they don't really want digital noise all over the print. So those of you that watch my videos know that I use Topaz Denoise to get rid of noise. So I use that in my workflow, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So what I do though is I start out in Lightroom, and if the image needs to be cropped, I'll crop it right away. Now this image here, I was shooting through an iron gate, and there were black metal iron bars around the gate, and my lens wouldn't fit through the gate. So you see how it's vignetted by the bars right here. So I had to crop the image. So the image is cropped. Then what I'll do is I do basic processing in Lightroom. And if it needed white balance adjustments, I would do that also. This image didn't. But then I do some processing here in the basic panel. Um, excuse me. Then if it needed a tone curve, anything done with the tone curve, I would do that. This image did not. Then I jump down to lens corrections and I apply the lens corrections for the image. And that's really all I'll do in Lightroom. Next, if it's a noisy image like this image is, it's this actually, when I first got my Nikon D800E, I was out experimenting with it and I was trying all different ISOs to see what the noise looked like at high ISOs. Now the D800E is an awesome camera. It's my favorite camera that I've ever owned. It has great resolution, but it has very poor high ISO performance. And if you look at this image and I zoom in, you could see that there's a lot of noise up here in the sky. And I shot this at ISO 1000. So what I would do is I would send this over to Topaz Denoise. Now, On1 Photo 10 Effects does have a noise filter that works very well, but I really like Topaz Denoise. And you guys know I've done videos on that as well. As a matter of fact, in the description below this video, there'll be a link to Topaz and a discount code where you could save 15% off anything from Topaz Labs. Now, to save time, I already sent this image over to Topaz Denoise, and I have this file right here. And if you want, we could compare them. I'll just hit C on my keyboard. And this is the original image, and this is the processed image for noise. And what we could do is we'll zoom in like 1:1, and you can see how the noise is gone, pretty much gone, and the one on the left. And we have a lot of digital noise on the one on the right, but we really didn't lose too much detail. And the cool thing now with On1 Photo 10, there's filters in On1 Photo 10 Effects where we could bring back any detail that I obliterated by using the noise software. So it really is a great combination. And it's worked out well for me. Let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of that. And we'll go back to our processed image. So again, that's my main concern is detail and noise. I want a lot of detail and I want very little noise. So we're going to send this over to On1 Effects. I right click on the image, I go down to Edit In, and I go down to Add On1 Effects. Now, because I sent this over to Denoise already, it creates a TIFF file because Topaz's plugins work with TIFF files. I could send this as the original TIFF file, or I could just do a copy of it or a copy with Lightroom adjustments. If I do a copy, it'll create a PSD file, which is probably more optimum for Topaz, but it works well with TIFF files. So I'm just going to send the original because TIFF files and PSD files are very large. They take up a lot of disk space. So I have no problem sending this file. I still have the original raw file as a backup, so I really am not concerned if I really screw something up here about losing the image totally. Okay, now as I look at the image, I say, well, it was a weird lighting day, and it was kind of bright, but it was still overcast, but still a lot of the buildings in that are kind of drab looking. So I want to do a tone enhancement. So I'm going to go down here to the tone enhancer and see what that does. In the default settings right off the bat, I like what it did. It brightened everything up nicely, but it did brighten the sky also. So I'd like to mask out what the tone enhancer is doing to the sky. I don't want it to affect the sky at all. Now, one thing that was updated in version 10.5 of On1 Photo 10 is they've improved the mask, like where you could find it. You may remember in the last video, I kind of was complaining slightly that the mask, you couldn't see it. It was black, and it was over here to the right on some of the filters. In some filters, it's white, some it's black, and you can't see the black one. You don't know it's there. Well, you could see they made it very obvious right here. We could add a mask. There's this mask icon with a plus sign in the middle. So I want to add a mask. We just click right there, and now we could add the mask. Now it defaults to white masks, which means the effect is being shown. Now I want to get rid of the effect on the sky. Now we've used the masking brush before, but today we're going to use the quick mask brush. I haven't used that yet. And the quick mask brush has similar controls. We could paint in or paint out. I want to paint the effect out of the sky. The size of the brush is 250 is fine. This little box here is new also. That's if you had, let's say, a statue standing up against the sky and you wanted the effect to only be on the statue or off the statue, you could draw a box around the statue. And then the smart brush, well, quick mask brush, I should say, not to be confused with the smart brush. The quick mask brush will try to keep the masking done to whatever you drew inside of the square. But we're not going to do that here. We're just going to use the normal quick mask. And I want to get rid of the image or the effect on the sky or the filter on the sky. So all I got to do is draw across the sky, just like that. And it takes a second to process. You can see it's processing the quick mask. And if you look at the sky, you'll see in a second, see how it got darker? It applied the filter to the sky. Okay, in the last video, when I was showing you the mask, you may remember I was going up to the View menu and we were going down to Show Mask and using Control M and things like that. And somebody in the comments below the video mentioned that you could just go down here into the lower left-hand corner and click this little icon here. And I neglected to tell you that. So we want to look at what we're masking. So we're just going to click this little icon. And you can see we're showing the mask. Now, it did a really decent job on the sky, but it masked out here too. So we really don't want it to mask out anything down here. So we're going to refine this mask. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go up here and get the masking brush, and we're going to paint in the effect down here. And I'm going to get a larger brush by hitting the right bracket key, and we're just going to get rid of it right here. Okay. Now, it did a pretty good job overall. What we could do though is we could go up to the view, and we could go the view mask mode and do grayscale. And you could see how it did a really nice job right there. So we're going to turn that off. And if I really get critical about it and I zoom in right here, and I hold the space bar in, I'll get the little hand and I could drag. You could see how it didn't get it right in there. I have this huge brush, probably like right in there. You could see how it's a little like messy. So what we could do here is we could get this brush right here. It's the refine brush. And with the refine brush is we just paint over this area right here. And you probably have to do it a few times. You watch. See, it got a little more and a little more and a little more. So that's the refine brush. So I wanted to show you those two brushes. So that worked real well. So now here's our filter or our mask, and you can see we just masked out the sky. So it did a really nice job, and I like the way the tone enhancer worked with its default settings. So I'm done with that. Now another filter which you guys probably are laughing at me that I use all the time is dynamic contrast. I think dynamic contrast could probably be sold as a separate product. It is so cool. I think it does such a great job. So we're going to add dynamic contrast to the image. And um, I like what it did. We could turn it off here, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. It might be just a touch strong. So we could try some different settings, and what you could do is you could click these three here that are the most common, natural, surreal, and soft. Or you could go to this little drop down here, and you could just hover over each of the settings, and it will get applied to the image. Now, it will take a time, especially on my computer, running the screen recording software bogs everything down. So it may take a little bit time to render. So you might want to just go slow and wait for it to render. There's surreal, looks a little more HDR look. I don't like that. Let's see what texture enhancer. I kind of like texture enhancer, so we're going to go with that as the default or preset that is inside of this filter. Now, um, a lot of times I'll come in here and I'll move some of the sliders around, but in this case I don't think I need to. Typically, if I'm doing wildlife, especially birds, I bring the large slider down a little bit and I bring the small slider up a little bit. It seems to give a little more detail to the feathers, a little more appealing detail to the feathers. And I usually don't do anything down here, especially now with the highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, because we added the tone enhancer filter. That's really not needed to do, nothing's needed to be done there. So pretty happy with that. So we have these two filters, and then I usually will finish off with a vignette. So I'm going to add a vignette, and the default vignette is subtle, and it's really so subtle you could barely see it. And I usually like the soft vignette. They call it the big softy, and that one is a little bit too heavy. So it's mainly, I think, the size and the brightness. So let's try the brightness first. I'll bring that down. And the size. Then let's turn the vignette off and on, off and on. That's okay. That's okay. Now what I'll do sometimes is I'll add a second vignette. So I'll add a second one because that seems to be just kind of toning down the edges a little bit, like undoing our tone enhancer around the edges. So what then I'll do is I'll add a second vignette. And in this vignette, I want it to be more around the edges. Like not that, but let's see. Not that. Let's jump down to dark edges now. That's horrible. Let's go back with that. And then what I'll do is I'll have to just manually do this. So I'll pull that down, brightness down, like that. That's not bad right there. See, maybe it's even just a little bit too encroaching into the center of the image. That's good like that. So I'm done. I have two vignettes, the dynamic contrast and the tone enhancer. And as I look at it, what I'll often do at this point is I walk away from my computer for a while because especially dynamic contrast, it tends to be your eyes are fatigued or something when you're looking at it and it looks okay. Then you'll look at it tomorrow and you're going to say, wow, I should have toned down the or the dynamic contrast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right into there and I'm going to bring, I could see now it's just a little strong. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And usually what I'll do is I'll bring it down to like a number like 50, like an even number like that. And then I'll look at it And if it looks good, then I'll try 60. Okay, and if that looks good, a lot of times I'll zoom in. In this case, I don't think I have to. I'll try 70. Okay, now that looks a little bit too much. So I was at 60. I'll try 65 now. This is the way I do it. Okay, it's kind of weird. I know. 65 looks good. I'll leave it there. Then I'll turn my vignettes back on. One bug I've found in On1 Photo 10 is sometimes like this. Now I can't turn this vignette back on. See how it's doing that? Every time I click it, it kind of blinks off and on. So I'll just delete it because you don't know if it's on or not. And I'm going to leave it like this because what I often do now, I'm going to click apply, is I'll go to Lightroom and I'll add a little bit more of a vignette in Lightroom. So I did add the darkening, the soft vignette. They call it Big Softy, and I adjusted it slightly um, in in the effects. And then once we're in here, now there's the original image. Let it render. Again, my computer runs very slowly when I'm running this software to record the screen. And there's our processed image. See, it brightened up the buildings nicely. I like what it did. So what I'll often do is I'll go down to effects here and I'll just add a vignette here that I like that. And that one's done. I'm good to go. All right. Now in the next image I just want to show you, I want to just show you some things that I think you might more often run into. I was at Fort Niagara State Park in Niagara Falls, and I just had my Fujifilm X-T1 with me, and I had on a 18 to 135 millimeter lens, which is kind of like a good all-around travel lens to use. I wasn't expecting to shoot wildlife. It wouldn't have been my first choice to shoot wildlife. Um, there happened to be a red-tailed hawk in a tree, and it was very brave and it allowed me to get relatively close to it. So I took some shots. Well, I want to process it. So I started out in Lightroom. It was a horizontal image, and I cropped it into a vertical. All right. I did the basic programming or basic processing again. I did some tone curve in this one, and then lens corrections are already applied when you use a Fujifilm camera, so I didn't have to really apply that. And now I'm ready to send it over to a noise program like Topaz Denoise or to On1 Effects. Now, the high ISO performance, this was ISO 800, the high ISO performance of the Fujifilm X series cameras is excellent, and so there really isn't a lot of noise. There is some in here, you know, I could, I probably would, if I anticipated that I might sell this as a print, I would send this over to Topaz Denoise, but I really don't think this is something I would sell as a signed print. I don't think anyone would want this. So I'm not going to take the time to send this over to Denoise. I'll use, this is something just for my own, you know, use to use online, things like that. Then I'll just go into On1 Effects directly, and I'll use the filter there for noise. And I will send it over as a copy with Lightroom adjustments. I use ProPhoto RGB, and again, I think I mentioned that. I use a resolution of 360. In a previous video, I was talking to a rep from Epson. I use Epson printer, and he said that they recommend that you use for their printers a resolution of 360. Now, I've never seen that written anywhere by Epson. That's just what the rep told me. So that's why I put a 360 resolution there, because I use Epson printer. So it creates the the um, Photoshop file, and it's asking me if I want to do a smart photo. I always say yes to the smart photo. Just if you know, I could come back and re-edit. That's all it allows me to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the filter for um, noise reduction first. I always like to get rid of the noise early in the workflow because you don't want to do other effects that might enhance the noise. Then it's harder to get rid of. So I'm zoomed in and I'm looking around. Now I'm going to turn this off and turn it on, turn it off, and I can see it did get rid of the noise just on the default subtle setting. But typically what I'll do is I again will go to the drop down and I would just hover over each one and see what it does. Now blue sky, color noise only, Mobile usually is very strong. Now what I look for is I not only am looking that it's removing the noise, I'm looking to see if I'm losing detail. And with mobile, let me go over mobile again. It really blurred out detail. Let's go back to see color. Now I'm on color noise only, and I want you to look at the bird's feather around its neck. And I'm going to go down to mobile. And you can see how it really blurred out that detail. And I want to try to preserve as much detail as possible. Now moderate was much better. Shadows only, that's still got not as good. Strong obliterated a lot of detail. I think moderate works very well for this specific image. Now, what I will do is I will come down here and move some of the sliders. The luminance slider just increases the noise reduction more. So the more I go to the right, see the more blurry it's getting because it's getting rid of the noise and getting rid of detail. Mainly what I'm going to do, most of the images I shoot don't get a lot of color noise, so I'm not so concerned about that slider. It's the two, luminance and detail. What I'll do is I'll move luminance till the noise is greatly reduced or gone. So I'll keep moving it up till it's gone. Then I go to detail, and if you move detail to the right, it will try to pull some of the detail back. Now let me show you extremes. Let me go to the far left. I want you to look at the bird's feathers right here. And then I go to the far right, and you can see how it pulled the detail back. Now there is some noise. You can see in here there's noise. So what we got to do is we got to mess around with these two sliders a little more to try to find a happy place where we could have them, where we're going to have maximum detail and minimum noise. Now, for the sake of this video and the time constraints, I'm not going to really play with them that much. That's part of the reason why I prefer Topaz Denoise. For me, because I've used it so long, it's a little easier for me to dial in the noise reduction and still retain detail. This takes a little more work for me, okay? Um, the range here is you could just affect certain tones, and you could then use this dropper to affect certain colors. So if you only want to affect the browns in the image, you could click on this and get an eyedropper and click on certain color that you want to affect, or greens or something like that, whatever. I usually won't use this, so I'll just mess with these two sliders. So I'm going to say tone noise reduction is done. Now next is, as I will typically do, is I use my favorite dynamic contrast, and I love what that did. I love what it did to the bird. I like actually what it did to this branch, but I don't like what it did to the rest of the image. So I want to apply it only to our bird and the branch, I think. So I am going to get a mask, so click right there, and I'm going to get the normal masking brush, and I'm going to use the perfect brush, okay? And what we're going to do is, I found this for me works a little better, is I start out backwards. So I want to invert this mask. So when I click invert, it's going to take the effect away from the entire image. And then I'm going to be in paint in mode. And I want to paint the effect in. So I'm going to paint it into the bird. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to go around the edge of the bird like this. And I want to do the branch too. So I'm going to do the branch, and I'm not so concerned. I am using the perfect brush, which kind of helps not like spilling over the edge, although even though it's called the perfect brush, it's not perfect. So what I'm laughing because I'm trying to do this, and my cat is trying to jump on my lap as I'm trying to do this. And he's hitting my arm as I do that. So you'll have to excuse him. All right, so I did around the edges. Let's see, I'm going to turn on the mask. And I, again, prefer the other view, the grayscale view. And you can see how it's okay. I mean, I did the edges all right. So we're going to turn off that perfect brush. And now we're going to get a bigger brush by hitting the right bracket key. And we're just going to manually paint in the rest of Mr. Bird, Mr. Hawk. Okay. like this. I'm going to try to get as close to the edge as possible. Typically what I'll do is I'll get a brush that's not as feathered, and I could get in a little closer. Sometimes I'll spill over, but that's okay. I really don't mind. Sometimes when you spill over, I mean, it's no big deal. In this case, that background was really busy with all the, tree branches flying around in the background. You're not going to see it. You're not going to really notice it, is what I'm trying to say. That, you spilled over. So we'll try to get this a little better, a little more towards the edge of Mr. Bird. I think I've really upset my cat because he can't jump on my lap. Okay, so we're going to turn off the mask, and you can see the mask itself right here. It looks pretty good. We'll turn it off, on, off, on. I like that. I think it did a nice job. Now, the other thing that the bird is kind of the same tone as its surroundings. And I want the bird to jump out a little more. So I am going to go back, and you can see I use a lot of the same things over and over. I'm going to use the tone enhancer. Okay, you see that brightened everything up? I don't want that. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the dynamic contrast filter that we just did, and I'm going to copy that mask. Then I'm going to go up to the tone enhancer filter, and I'm going to add the mask by clicking right there, and I'm going to paste the mask here. Now it brightened up the bird, and it brightened up this branch, but it left the background relatively dark. And I really like that. Now, what I could do is I could undo. When you do tone enhancer, it will automatically do an auto tone. If you don't like that, you could just turn that off and do it manually yourself. And I'll try it. I'll just see. I want to open up the shadows of the bird a little and on that branch. And don't think I'm going to bring brightness up. I'll bring highlights down a little. Give a little more detail in his lighter feathers when I do that. Let's do that and just bring brightness up just a touch. All right, I kind of like that. So that's good. So pretty much done. What I'm going to do is I think just add my vignette. And of course, I like this big softy usually. And I like that. I like pretty much how it did it. I think maybe we'll just bring the size in just out, I should say, just a little bit. It seems to be encroaching on his beak just a touch. So that's it. I'm done. I'll click apply. One thing I double check is that all these are checked, because sometimes I go into them and it automatically unchecks the ones that are above it. And I want to, there's been a couple times I've thought I was done and I clicked done and I realized some of those weren't checked. So it's very important that you double check those. So here is our original image. And here is now our original processed, Lightroom processed image. And here's our image after we send it to On1 Effects. Now, the only thing I think, looking at it, I was kind of rushing going through the video, and I don't pre-do these before the video. When you see me do them, it's kind of live as we're doing it. So I'm doing it for the first time. And this bright spot right here, I would probably bring it back. Well, I could just right click on it and I could go back in because it was um, a smart file. I could go down to On1 Effects again, and we're going to edit the original. And we're going to click edit, and then we're going to go into, now it's going to have our filters will pop up here that we already added to it. That's pretty cool. So we're going to add a filter, and what we want to do is add adjustment brush. I want to add an adjustment brush, and I want to darken right there. Okay, and then we're going to paint in the effect. We're going to paint in the darker effect. I'm going to use this brush. I'm going to keep the feathering at default 50, the opacity at 100, and see what it looks like. All right, we could undo it. Now that's too dark, right? So to undo that, I'm just going to hit Command Z on my keyboard to undo that. All right, so we're going to bring the opacity way down to like 30. And I think our brush is much too big. So we're just going to darken this. Now this is a cumulative effect. Even though I'm at opacity of 29, I could paint it on there once, and then I could paint over it again a second time, and it will add onto it. All right, so I'm mainly concerned with that sky area that's popping through above his head mainly. I just want to bring that down. Okay. Now we could use the perfect brush, and if I put that plus sign just on the blue sky, it'll tend to only affect the blues and leave the branches and the leaves alone. So right when I put it over there and click on that, it's only going to affect those colors for that brush stroke. All right, this bright part down here I'm not really concerned about. So that's good. I think that's better. We're going to click apply, and then that will save that and bring us back to our image. And you can see it's darker there. So there's the original image, and there is our processed image. So that's how I incorporate On1 Photo 10 effects into my workflow. You can see I use pretty much the same filters over and over because that's my style. Um, in future videos, we will do some different things where we're going to maybe create a black and white image or different types of images that aren't necessarily a full color image. So we will cover that in some future videos. But for now, that's kind of the primer, these last 3 videos, for getting you started in On1 10 photo effects. The next video, we're going to take a look at On1 resize. I mentioned I sell prints, and the prints are usually fairly large. And when I crop an image like this, I'm losing a lot of pixels, and it really will affect how large I can make the print. Well, On1 resize brings it all back. It's a great, great program and plugin, and we're going to do that in the next video. And then we'll go from there, and we'll talk about some other things we'll be covering. There's really so much more to cover. This is such great software. I've been really enthused since I've been using this latest version of On1 software. I think it's awesome. So that's it. I'd like to thank everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.